In our last session, we did RBAC for human access to cluster. This is the video number 17 of DevOps Kubernetes training. So this is the second video we did for the RBAC. RBAC is basically a big topic. That's why I am doing the multiple videos for this topic. So we discuss in detail the service account concept, the RBAC, and how we can create the SSL certificates for the human use, human connectivity with the cluster. We created in our last session. If I show you my cluster is up and running, and if I show you in our last session, I create this kubeconfig file, and this kubeconfig file contains a single context and a single certificate authority, and it's a single user, and it is connecting with this cluster. So today we have to look the concept of context. So far, the kubeconfig file we created just contain a single context, but a kubeconfig file can have more than one context, and the more than one context can be in sense of you can have a single cluster with multiple user, or you can have multiple cluster with multiple user. So each user will have its own context in your kubeconfig file, and that context can refer to different Kubernetes cluster. So far I have a single Kubernetes cluster, and I have this kubeconfig file. So first of all, I will show you how can I create one more user in the same kubeconfig file. So it will show me the two context. So then you will get the idea, and then you can create the multiple user in a single file. This can be a requirement in your practical life, but mostly the context are referring to different clusters. So as an administrator, you will have administrative access or some limited access to the multiple cluster, and you will have some kubeconfig file that contain a list of cluster in a single kubeconfig file. But I will show you, first of all, if I quickly create another user in my SSL certificate for my another user. So far right now I am in this directory. So let me just quickly create another directory, just like some developer SSL certs. Okay, so I'm going there, and I will follow the same documentation. Just quickly, I will follow this. If you are confused with this concept, so you must have to follow the previous two videos. So I'm going to follow this same document, but I will just change here with developer. So I generate a key file, and next thing is I have to create this developer's certificate signing request. And the username will be something like developer. Okay. The next thing is we have to create a template file. So I'll just create a template file as it is. But after the creation of this signing request template manifest file, I will just change here the username to some meaningful developer. So here I have to put the certificate signing request in the base 64 encoded format. So for that reason, I will put whatever I created into a variable. And this is my if I do suggest an echo $fine to this variable just for the verification, I can see this variable contain the in base 64 encoded of certificate signing request. And next step is to just generate our manifest using this template. And in this manifest, I have CSR template is good. Just I have to change the manifest name to developer. And rest of all is good. If I list down here, I can see this developer certificate signing request manifest file is ready. The next step is just I have to apply this for the certificate signing request. kubectl get certificate signing request. This is in pending state, and we can do an approval of this certificate as an administrator, and you can see it is approved. So I need to get the signed certificate. Just change all the values with the meaningful. The CSR is developer-CSR, and rest of all is good. So I just pull down the signed certificate, this one, cert file. Okay, so next thing is I signed my certificate. I have private key, I have public key, and everything is good. So I have this my private key. This is my public key. Certificate signing request, I don't need. This manifest, I don't need. This is done. You can delete this, but for further reference, you can save this. And you don't need even this template. So I have public and private key, and to create the kubeconfig file, we also need the certificate authority file too. So in this document, it is mentioned if you go to this location. So you can see this is a certificate authority for the API server that was used to sign these certificates. And now we have to, in last session, I generate a new file, but now thing is I already have a certificate, a kubeconfig file that already contain the configuration for the kubeconfig. So if I go there, I can see this file is there. I am just copying this file here, kubeconfig file. So this kubeconfig file last time I create from scratch, but now this is the situation when I already have a user and I want to embed a new user in the existing file. So new user will have a different context, will have its own certificate. So how it will work, I will show you. So now you can see last session, I used this kubeconfig set cluster commands to create a new file. But the same commands we can use to modify an existing file. So let me show you. This is my command, and this is my existing kubeconfig file. So let me first of all do one thing. Let me rename this file with a generic name, just like my cluster Kubernetes. What is the name of my cluster is Kubernetes here. So anything I can say, just like my VU training dot kubeconfig. Okay, just renaming this file to some meaningful, because it will now contain multiple users. So the name of the file like a user is not a good idea. But now what I have to do, okay, I will just copy the same command, and I will use the same command. I will modify this kubeconfig file name with this name. Okay, so same command I can use to append any existing file. Okay, so here is the path of my certificate authority. This is already available, and here is the port number and IP, and I don't need to perform this action, this command actually, because this is already done. So far I am going to connect with the same cluster, but for a different user. So this task is already completed. So I don't need to run this command. Like if you look my previous video, you can get the idea what this command is doing. This is creating a file from scratch. So, but we already have a file that contains the cluster information where the API server is running. So the second command is set credentials for the user. So this command we must have to run, because this time our username is developer, we have we have public certificate, private certificate. So this command I will use to add the new certificate in the existing file. And the existing file is this one. And here the key file is the developer. Okay, and here the public certificate is developer, and here the username, when I create the certificate signing request, I defined in the subject as developer, and that's good. So what this command will do, this command actually did a modification in the existing file. In this file, if I show you, previously I showed you this file. This file now contains, let me do a more to this file. So you can see here, this is the certificate signing authority. This is my cluster API access. And here you can see a new user. This was Asimis user. Okay. And here what happened, these are the certificates related to user Asimis. And if you go down, you can see the new certificates are also added for the user developer. But so far, we have not added any context for this user. So this command actually did the magic of adding the certificates in the existing file. Now this file contains two users, public and private certificate. And this is from the same cluster, so that's why the certificate authority for both the certificates are same. Okay, next thing, set context. So this command will do the configuration of context for this developer user. So here, the name of the file used this one, and the user is developer, and the namespace, what namespace I want to assign, for example, developer namespace, I want to assign some dev namespace. Okay, it can be any. any namespace. And the name of the cluster is Kubernetes. You can define any name here. And set context, the name of the context, I want to set something like developer context. Okay, so this will add in the existing kubeconfig file a new user, developer user context with this name. So everything seems good. Let me press enter. And if I again do a more, you can see now there are two contexts. One is for this user, one is for developer user. And the current context is set to this one. Whenever whoever will be using this file, the default context will be this. But if you change this default context to developer, it will be default. So at a time, only current context can be only one. So this file can contain a number of users. Okay, so you can see now everything is good. When you will use this context, it will follow this user and this user information certificate. Everything is embedded here. So we are done. This is just an example for the two user. And last sesh is to set the current context, to change the current context, but I don't want to change the current context. So let me just quickly pull down this file to my Windows, and from my Windows I will hit to my cluster using this file. So how can I switch to different context? I will show you. So let me just copy this file to download, and here this new file is created, and I will pull down this file on my desktop. This is the permission error, no problem. I can change chmod ownership, actually the root user, so awesome user don't have power to pull down this file because this is owned by root user. So I just change the, sorry, chown, not mod. Now I will do it's downloaded. So next step is I have to go my in Windows environment variable, and I have to change the kubeconfig environment variable to pointing to this new file. Kubeconfig is I need to browse this file to my desktop, and it's vu kubeconfig. Okay, I go to my CMD, and if I do an echo kubeconfig, so you can see it is pointing to my new file. And if I run kubectl, kubectl, we did this in detail in our last session. That's why I'm going quickly. So kubectl config view. So I can see my config file contains two context and two user certificates, and both are pointing to the same cluster. I can also use kubeconfig, kubectl config get contexts. So now you can see there are two contexts. One context name is Asim Hasan context, second is developer context, and right now what context I am using, the star. This is the default one. So if I use the current context, so right now I am using this, and this context is pointing to this cluster, to this user, and this user has a default namespace def. So let me change the context to developer. So I am changing my context, and you can now see the current context is this, and get context. This one will be the default one next time, but right now I am, developer context modified. Let me just quickly have a look to the file. So right now the current context is, I think kubectl config hyphen help. Let me check how to set cluster, set context, set a context entry in the, this is for to make a new entry. Okay, set credential, get context, current context, and there is a set use context. Yeah, I was doing this thing wrong. So config view, let me check anything modified, nothing. So actually this is the use context, not the set context. Use context and config view get contexts. So you can see the star is shifted here. And if we go to in the file, it actually modify inside the file the current context to this one. So now if I do a kubectl get pod, so it will give me an error that this developer user don't have any access. Okay, so I can create any role-based access control, what I did in our last session. So same thing you can apply, and then you can apply the some role-based access control on this developer, and then this developer can do different actions on this cluster. But so far, this user does not contain any rights. So I am not going to perform any role-based access control on this developer user. And if I switch back to different context, Asim-san, you remember I set up some rights role-based access control for this user. That's why I can view this part. So if I try to delete this part, let me check either I gave the rights to. So this user does not contain any deletion rights, but it can view. So with this way, you can jump into different context within the same cluster. So in the next session, we are going to cover how we can manage a single kubeconfig file for multi-cluster. So in your professional life, you will have a number of clusters to manage. So it is a difficult job to switch every time this kubeconfig environment variable to different pointing to different kubeconfig files every time, because you have to jump to different cluster quickly. So you should have a single file that contains the information of all the clusters. So how that is possible, in the next session, we will perform this activity.